Japan has one of the tiniest Christian populations in the world, even somehow smaller than North Korea. But it's not like Christianity just never got a chance to be established there. 400 years ago, as many as 500,000 Christians existed in Nagasaki alone. Just 100 years later, there were almost none in the entirety of Japan. So, where did they all go? Well, they were tortured and eventually executed by the government of Japan. Yes, Japan committed atrocious mass genocide against Christians in the country that would make even Kim Jong-un wince. That being said, there are still some Christians that survived. Their incredible struggle is officially blessed as a miracle by the Vatican. This is their story. 500 years ago, Japan wasn't even a proper country. Warlords hired thousands of sword-wielding samurais to battle to the death against neighbor states. Well, in 1543, Portuguese merchants arrived in Japan and sold the weapon that would change Japanese history forever: guns. You know how you should never bring a sword to a gunfight, right? Understandably, every bloodthirsty warlord rushed to trade with Portugal, but Portugal had one quirky condition. They only sold guns to Christians. Sure, you know what? Whatever. The warlords couldn't build the damn churches fast enough. Who cares about the technicalities of the afterlife as long as their enemies get there first with a few bullet holes? While Catholicism was initially popular among the poor and the wretched Japanese, some warlords mass converted their entire populations for even more guns. The native Buddhist and Shinto population understandably hated this, and the whole country started to normalize Christian hate. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the great unifier of feudal Japan, believed that the conniving Westerners, Portugal in particular, were trying to colonize Japan through religion. On July 25th of 1587, Hideyoshi formally announced that all missionaries must be deported from Japan. Sounds bad, but this wasn't actually enforced because he still wanted to trade with Portugal, and Japan's Christian population, ironically, increased in the following years. Because of its reliance on the West, Japan couldn't antagonize the West and just murder Christians outright yet. A new player enters the game. The Netherlands also wanted to trade with Japan now, but here's the twist. They were Protestants and hated Catholics because of Catholic Spain's brutal religious persecution during its occupation. The two enemy religions met in Japan and were more than happy to continue their crusade against each other. Remember how the Catholics insisted on the guns and Jesus package and force-fed religion to the Japanese? The Protestant majority Netherlands was happy to trade with no religious strings attached, which made this whole "the bad West is trying to conquer you with religion" conspiracy even more plausible. To make matters worse, the incumbent government, the Edo shogunate, was traditionally Buddhist and held nothing but scorn for other religions. This hostile sentiment was shared and amplified by other Buddhists, Confucianists, and even Protestant merchants. Hold on, so if Japan already has a Western trading partner, what's stopping them from just killing off all the Christians? You can probably see where this is going. The straw that broke the camel's back was a massive bribery scandal, and I mean Bane knee drop level of backbreaking. A particularly unlucky Catholic got caught trying to bribe a government official for more land, and the entirety of Japan was outraged. The government decided that Christianity plagued Japan for long enough, and the only solution left, really, was a good old purge. On January 27th of 1614, a nationwide hardcore ban on Christianity was announced. This anti-Christian policy wasn't a half measure like last time. They actually meant it this time and intended to extinguish even the tiniest spark of foreign religion by whatever means necessary. All foreigners and missionaries were deported. All churches were brutally demolished. All Japanese Christians were forced to denounce their religion. All that didn't obey were exiled to the Philippines. While the official order was forced conversion and deportation, the numerous unfortunate Christians that died in the process were swept under the rug. Well, what about foreign trade and the economy? Surely the Western countries have sanctions, right? Ha, screw your sanctions. Japan was going into full isolationist lockdown mode and wanted to stomp out any foreign influence. Christians had their net worth seized and were banned from having jobs until they converted, forcing them to choose between food or religion. They couldn't rely on help from their neighbors either. Non-Christians suspected of just helping out a Christian buddy were also executed non-discriminately, which made everyone fear the mere association with Christianity. He even selected prominent Christian leaders like priests and elders from every village and publicly tortured them until they denounced their religion or died of pain. The torture methods only got more sophisticated to maximize pain and terror. Victims were branded with red-hot irons, had their limbs sawed off, and were plunged screaming into boiling water. Those who were unfortunate enough to survive the torture were permanently crippled and dragged through the village streets as a horrifying example. The most famous torture method was called anasarushi, which was an appalling reverse hanging. The victims would be strung upside down in a filthy ditch with a tiny hole drilled into their heads. They could either denounce Christianity or slowly bleed to death over several excruciating days. A doctor would be sometimes around to revive them in case they flatlined, denying the Christians even the right to die with their faith. While some prominent Christian martyrs held true to their faith to the very end, countless believers and foreign missionaries gave up their religion after hours or days of this nightmarish torture. Can you blame them? The writing was on the wall for whatever Christians remained within Japan. They either hid their religion or escaped to Macau or the Philippines to practice their faith in peace. Sure enough, the persecution somehow only got worse, to the point where a full-scale rebellion erupted in Christian-dense Shimabara and Amasuka. The brave Christian farmers armed themselves and rose up, reinforced by wandering Christian samurais left jobless after the war. The rebel forces swelled to 20 to 40,000 well-organized insurgents, and there just weren't enough local government soldiers to put it down anymore. Village after village joined the rebellion, and the rebels attacked their oppressor with impressive ferocity. The central government even sent 127,000 soldiers to stomp them out, but the holy warriors somehow held out. Could this revolution be the very salvation that God promised to the faithful? You know how the story ends. The Japanese government forced the Dutch to cough up gunpowder, cannons, and even a vessel. Armed with overwhelming firepower, manpower, and supplies, the Christian army was eventually overrun. This kind of chicanery was completely unacceptable to Japan. To make sure that no one else got any funny ideas in the future, they brutally beheaded everyone, an estimated total of 37,000 Christian fighters and even bystanders. Christian persecution finally reached paranoid, secret police levels after the Shimabara Rebellion. Lucrative bounties were placed on the heads of Christians, while priests and monks were worth a life-changing amount of money alive or dead. All Japanese people were required to spy on each other in groups of 5 and report any signs of Christianity. At the beginning of every year, the authorities would visit every single house with an image of Jesus and order every man, woman, and child to stomp on it. Any outrage or hesitation whatsoever was deemed as evidence of being a Christian. Even the most devout Christians were forced to openly denounce and condemn their religion if they wanted to survive. There were no more priests in Japan. How could there be? Even the Vatican gave up trying to establish contact with their followers, and the tiny population of surviving Christians were completely stranded and left for dead. When the Edo shogunate's isolationist doors were blasted in by the Western invasion at the end of the 19th century, French missionaries were astonished to discover that Japanese Catholics, presumed to be worse off than extinct, were still holding true to their faith. They had such a powerful belief, learned from word of mouth, that not even the ruthless, systematic persecution could completely exterminate them. These faithful Christians that survived in hiding for 200 years are called kakure keristan, with kakure meaning secret and keristan meaning Christian. Their villages and relics are currently designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites for the astonishing, unprecedented resilience of faith in the face of persecution. The tragic, brave, yet hopeful story of Japanese Christians is officially recognized as a miracle by the Vatican. Regardless of your personal beliefs, I'm sure you could admit that this is impressive. This has been David Bradford from Knowledge Raiders, and don't forget to leave that like if you enjoyed it.